The millionaire's son was trying to call for help, but only the new nurse understood him. Jennifer Williams felt her hands tremble as she held the clipboard with the data for patient in room 412. It was her third day at Mercy General Hospital, the most expensive in Chicago, and she could hardly believe she had landed that position after so many failed interviews at smaller hospitals. When she entered the room for the first time, she didn't expect to find a young man of just 24 years old completely immobile in a hospital bed, equipped with every imaginable technology. His eyes moved quickly in her direction as soon as the door opened. "Good morning, Tyler. I'm Jennifer. I'll be taking care of you during this shift," she said, approaching the bed carefully. His eyes widened and began to blink in a way she couldn't ignore. They weren't normal blinks. There was something there, something that made her stomach churn without exactly understanding why. "Are you experiencing any discomfort?" she asked, checking the monitors beside the bed. The blinking continued, faster now. Jennifer felt a strange pang in her chest, a sensation she couldn't name but that left her unsettled. She checked all the equipment, adjusted the pillow, but those eyes wouldn't stop moving, blinking, as if they were trying to scream something that the mouth couldn't utter. The door opened again, and a woman entered the room with a bouquet of white lilies. She was elegant, wearing an impeccable beige suit and carrying a designer bag that Jennifer only saw in magazines. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup was subtle but expensive. "Good afternoon," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're new here, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Nurse Jennifer. I just started this week." "That's nice. I'm Vanessa, Tyler's mother," she quickly corrected. "I mean, stepmother. But for all intents and purposes, I'm the one who's been taking care of him since this happened." It was at that moment that Jennifer noticed. Tyler's eyes began to blink frantically, in a pattern completely different from before. They weren't blinks of discomfort or pain. They were desperate, urgent blinks, as if he were trying to scream without a voice. Vanessa placed the flowers in the vase beside the bed, without even looking at her stepson. "How is he today? Any improvement?" she asked Jennifer, but her tone was mechanical, like someone repeating a rehearsed question. "His vital signs are stable, ma'am. Dr. Harrison should stop by later this afternoon for a more complete evaluation." "Great. I'll stay here for a few minutes if you don't mind." Jennifer nodded and started to leave the room, but before closing the door, she looked back one more time. Tyler was staring at her with an intensity that almost made her stumble. And then she saw again those rapid, desperate blinks. Outside, she leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. There was something wrong there, something her nursing instincts were picking up, but that her rational mind still couldn't process. She thought of her grandma Catherine, whom she had cared for in the last years of the family matriarch's life. Grandma had had a stroke that left her unable to speak and with limited mobility, but Jennifer had learned to understand every movement of her eyes. Every little blink had meaning. Was Tyler trying to communicate in the same way? The idea seemed absurd at the moment. The hospital was full of specialist doctors, experienced nurses, physical therapists. If there were any form of communication, surely someone would have noticed. Tyler had been hospitalized for 4 months, according to the chart. 4 months was enough time for any minimally attentive professional to notice communication patterns. Jennifer returned to the nursing station and began to read Tyler's chart more carefully. Tyler Robertson, 24 years old, business administration student, only son of Richard Robertson, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state. He had suffered a car accident that resulted in severe head trauma and complete body paralysis. The doctors had diagnosed locked-in syndrome, a rare condition where the patient is conscious but completely paralyzed, able to move only their eyes. She read about the treatments, the therapies, the medications. Everything seemed correct, following established protocols. But then she noticed something strange. In the notes from the last few weeks, there were several mentions of increases in sedative and muscle relaxant doses. Why would an already paralyzed patient need increasingly larger doses of these medications? "Jennifer," called Sharon, the head nurse, a 50-year-old woman with a perpetually serious expression. "I need you to prepare the medication for room 412. The prescription is here." Jennifer took the prescription and began sorting the medications. As she worked, Sharon approached and lowered her voice. Listen, this patient in 412 is special. His family is very influential here at the hospital, so any slightest change you report to me immediately. Understood? Yes, of course. And one more thing. Sharon hesitated for a moment. Don't get too attached to the case. We've had other nurses who started seeing things that weren't there. It's a sad case, such a young man in that situation, but we need to maintain professionalism. That comment echoed in Jennifer's mind for the rest of her shift. Other nurses had seen things. What things? She wanted to ask more, but Sharon had already returned to her tasks, and her posture didn't invite further questions. When she returned to room 412 to administer the afternoon medication, Vanessa had already left. Jennifer was alone with Tyler for the first time since that morning. She connected the IV with the medication and then approached the head of the bed. "Tyler," she said softly, "I don't know if you can fully understand me, but I want you to know that I'm here to take care of you the best way possible." His eyes fixed on hers with frightening intensity. "I'm going to do something now, and I want you to try to cooperate, okay? If you can understand me, blink once." There was a long, distressing pause. Then, deliberately, Tyler blinked once. Jennifer's heart raced. "If you can't understand me, blink twice." Nothing. He kept his eyes open, staring at her without blinking. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. "Do you understand?" 1 blink. Jennifer had to hold onto the side of the bed. Her legs seemed to have lost their strength. She looked at the closed door, then back at Tyler. "Are you in pain right now?" 2 blinks. "No." Are you afraid?" A long pause. Then 1 strong, determined blink. "Yes." "Afraid of what?" The question came out before Jennifer could control herself. How would he answer something so open-ended? But then Tyler did something that made her blood run cold. His eyes moved deliberately toward the door, then back to her. He blinked 3 times in a row fast, desperate. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jennifer couldn't sleep that night. She returned to her small apartment on the east side of Chicago, a tiny studio she shared with her cousin Caroline, and lay in the dark going over every detail of what had happened. Tyler could communicate. He was conscious, understanding everything around him, and he was afraid of something or someone. The question that wouldn't leave her mind was, why hadn't anyone else noticed? 4 months. Dozens of professionals passing through that room every day. How was it possible that no one had established this basic form of communication with him? The next morning, Jennifer arrived at the hospital half an hour early. She went straight to the digital archives and began reading all the nursing reports from the last 4 months. It was a revealing and disturbing read. In the first 2 months, there were regular mentions of eye responsiveness, eye movements, attempts at communication. But starting from the 3rd month, these mentions began to decrease until they disappeared completely. What had changed? She checked the medication list and found the answer. From the 3rd month, the doses of sedatives had increased significantly. Not enough to leave Tyler unconscious, but enough to make him more lethargic, less responsive. Looking for something specific? The voice behind her made her jump in surprise. It was Dr. Howard Harrison, the physician in charge of Tyler's case. He was a man in his 50s, always impeccably dressed, with a reputation for excellence that had made him one of the most sought-after doctors at the hospital. "Oh, doctor, I was just reviewing the case of the patient in 412. I want to make sure I'm doing everything correctly." "Very well, it's good to see dedication in a new nurse," he smiled, but the smile wasn't warm. "But if you have any questions about the case, you can come speak with me directly. No need to go digging through files alone." "Of course, doctor, thank you." He stood there for a few more seconds, as if wanting to make sure she had understood the message before walking away. Jennifer felt a chill. There was something in the way he had said it, a veiled tone of warning. During her morning shift, Jennifer entered room 412, determined to investigate further. Tyler was awake, looking at the window where the morning light was illuminating the white, sterile room. When he saw her, his eyes moved rapidly as if he was anxious for her arrival. "Good morning, Tyler." She closed the door behind her and approached. "Let's talk a bit, okay?" One blink. "Yes." "First of all, I need to know, does anyone else here at the hospital know that you can communicate this way?" Two blinks. "No." "Has no one tried to establish this kind of communication with you?" One long blink, then two quick ones. Yes and no. The ambiguous answer confused her. "Did someone try in the past?" One blink. "Yes." "But they don't try anymore." One blink. "Yes, that's right." "Why did they stop? Was it because of the medication?" One strong, emphatic blink. "Yes." Jennifer felt anger growing in her chest. How could they do this? Increase unnecessary medications for a patient already in such a fragile state? And why? "Tyler, I'm going to ask more specific questions now, and you answer me with yes or no, okay?" One blink. "The woman who was here yesterday, Vanessa, is she the one doing something wrong?" Tyler's eyes widened, and he blinked once so hard it was almost as if he was shouting, "Yes, yes, yes." Is she harming you in some way?" One blink. Physically. Pause. Two blinks. Not directly physical. "Does she want something from you, from your family?" A blink so intense that his eyes stayed closed for an extra second. Jennifer had to sit down. Her legs could no longer support her. She was facing a situation that completely exceeded her experience, a possible case of abuse, manipulation, maybe even something worse, and she was the only person who knew. "Tyler, I need more information, but I can't just ask yes or no questions. Do you know Morse code?" Two blinks. "No." Jennifer thought quickly. She remembered the time with her grandma when they had developed their own system. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. "Let's try something else. I'm going to recite the alphabet, and you blink when I get to the right letter. That way we can form words. It'll be time-consuming, but it'll work. Can you do that?" One blink, but weaker this time. He was tired, she noticed. Communication required effort from him, an effort that the medication was trying to suppress. "Not today," said Jennifer, noticing the fatigue in his eyes. "You need to rest. But I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll try again. Meanwhile, I'll find out everything I can about what's happening here." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't cry fully, but the moisture was there, evident, moving. "I promise, Tyler. I'll help you. You're not alone anymore." A blink, soft, grateful. Jennifer left the room with a heavy heart and a mind in turmoil. She needed a plan. She needed to be careful. If there really was something wrong going on there, powerful people were involved. Dr. Harrison seemed to know something. Sharon had given that warning about other nurses. And Vanessa was the one who would benefit the most if Tyler could never speak again. During lunch, Jennifer went to the hospital cafeteria and sat next to Michael, a nurse who had worked there for 10 years and had always been friendly to her. "Michael, can I ask you a kind of strange question?" "Sure, go ahead." "Do you know about the patient in 412? Tyler Robertson?" Michael made a face. "I do. Sad case." "Why?" "It's just... Look, maybe I'm seeing things, but it seemed to me like he was trying to communicate with me yesterday." Michael's expression changed completely. He looked around before lowering his voice. "Jennifer, I'm going to give you some friendly advice. Don't get involved with that case more than necessary. Just do your job and that's it." "But why? What's so special about this case?" "Everything. His family is filthy rich. The father, Richard Robertson, owns half the private clinics here in Chicago. He's one of the biggest donors to this hospital. And the stepmother, that Vanessa, she has connections with half the important doctors here. So, that doesn't mean we shouldn't take good care of Tyler." "It's not that," Michael sighed. "About 2 months ago there was a nurse here, Bethany. She was good, experienced, worked here for years. She started asking the same questions you are, saying that Tyler was trying to communicate, that there was something wrong with his medication." "And what happened to her?" instant dismissal. They accused her of stealing controlled medications. They found boxes of medication in her locker. Everyone knows it was planted, but there was no way to prove anything. She lost her job, lost her license, had to leave Chicago. Jennifer felt her blood run cold. And no one did anything? What could we do? It was her word against Dr. Harrison's and the hospital administration's. And look, Jennifer, I like you. You seem like a good person. That's why I'm warning you. Don't stir up that hornet's nest. But Jennifer couldn't just pretend she hadn't seen anything. That night she stayed up researching everything she could find about Richard Robertson and his family. The businessman had built an empire in the private healthcare sector over the last 3 decades. He had married young to Hannah Collins, who passed away 15 years ago under circumstances that the newspapers at the time described as a tragic household accident. Jennifer looked for more details about this accident, but information was scarce. Hannah had fallen from a ladder at home, hit her head, and didn't survive her injuries. The case was filed as an accident. Richard was left a widower with a 9-year-old son to raise. 3 years later, he married Vanessa Parker, who was 20 years younger. Vanessa had worked as an elderly caregiver before meeting Richard, according to an old Society magazine article. They had met at a charity event. Something about this story bothered Jennifer, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Maybe it was just her imagination working in overdrive, because of the stress and the whole situation. The next day, she returned determined. Entering room 412, she found Vanessa already there, sitting in a chair beside the bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when Jennifer entered. "Good morning," Vanessa said with that same cold smile. "Good morning, Mom. I'm here to do the morning checkup. Please make yourself at home." Vanessa stood up. "I need to take care of some things. I'll be back later." Before leaving, she approached Tyler and ran her hand through his hair in a gesture that was meant to seem affectionate, but made his whole body tense up. Jennifer noticed. Vanessa also noticed that she had noticed. The two women stared at each other for a second that seemed to last an eternity. "He gets very agitated sometimes," Vanessa said, breaking the silence. "It's a neurological reaction, according to Dr. Harrison. That's why they need to increase the medication, so he doesn't suffer so much." There was something in the way she said it, a subtle emphasis on the word suffer that sounded like a veiled threat. "I understand," Jennifer replied, keeping her voice steady. As soon as Vanessa left, Jennifer rushed to the door and locked it from the inside. She knew she had little time. She quickly returned to Tyler's side. "We need to be quick. I'm going to ask direct questions and you answer with yes or no, okay?" One blink. "Is Vanessa trying to harm you in some way?" One blink. "Does this have to do with money, inheritance?" A strong blink. "Does your father know what she's capable of?" 2 blinks. "No." "Is he in danger too?" A long pause. Then 1 blink, uncertain, worried. "The accident you had wasn't really an accident." Tyler's eyes filled with tears again, and he blinked once, slowly, as if that truth were too heavy to admit. Jennifer felt her legs weaken. She held onto the bed, trying to process what she had just discovered. It hadn't been an accident. Tyler was in that bed because someone had done that to him, and the main suspect was free, visiting him every day, probably ensuring through the medication that he could never tell the truth. "Tyler, I need proof, something concrete that I can use. Is there anything? Some document, a recording, anything?" He began blinking frantically, trying to communicate something more complex. Jennifer grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. "I'm going to do the alphabet. Help me form the words." It was a slow and exhausting process. Each letter took almost a minute to identify, with Jennifer reciting the alphabet and Tyler blinking when she reached the right one. But gradually the words formed. Car, recorder, dashboard. Is there something recorded in the car? Some evidence in the car's system? 1 blink. The accident car? 1 blink. 1. And where is that car now? More painful blinks, more letters slowly forming. Garage house, Dad. So there was evidence in the car that was in Tyler's father's house garage. But how would Jennifer get access to it? She was just a nurse with no connection to the family. other than caring for Tyler at the hospital. A loud knock on the door made her jump. "Jennifer!" It was Sharon's voice. "Why is the door locked?" "Sorry." She ran to the door and opened it. "I was doing some procedures and didn't want to be interrupted." Sharon entered the room and looked around suspiciously. "What procedures?" "I was checking ocular reflexes, as Dr. Harrison asked." The lie came out quickly, rehearsed. "He didn't ask for any of that." "Oh, it must have been my mistake then. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the protocols here." Sharon kept looking at her with that stern expression, then turned to Tyler. She approached the bed and checked the monitors, the tubes, the medication. Then she looked directly into his eyes for a long moment. Tyler didn't blink, didn't move, remained completely still. "Everything is fine here," Sharon finally said. "But Jennifer, I need to speak with you outside." Jennifer's heart raced, but she tried to maintain her composure. They left the room and Sharon led her to an empty room. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to do, but I'll be clear with you. This is not a normal case. There are much bigger interests involved here. Dr. Harrison asked me to keep an eye on you. I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just taking care of my patient." "That's what they all say at first." Sharon crossed her arms. "Bethany said that too, and Kathy before her. They all ended up creating far-fetched theories, convincing themselves they were saving the boy from some imaginary plot." "What if it wasn't imaginary?" Jennifer couldn't hold back the question. What if there really was something wrong? Sharon took a step forward, lowering her voice even further. "Then you should be smart enough to understand that there are battles a newly graduated nurse from the East Side can't win. People with much more power and influence than you have already tried to question this case. They all came out badly. How old are you? 25? 26? Your whole life ahead of you. Don't throw it all away over a case with no solution." "What if it were you in that bed?" Jennifer felt the anger rising. "Wouldn't you want someone to fight for you? I'm not in that bed, and neither are you. Think about it." Sharon left the room, leaving Jennifer alone with her swirling thoughts. She understood at that moment that she couldn't count on anyone at the hospital. If she wanted to help Tyler, she would have to do everything alone and in absolute secrecy. Over the next few days, Jennifer maintained a normal routine at the hospital, being as discreet as possible. But whenever she managed to be alone with Tyler, even if for just a few minutes, she continued trying to extract more information from him. It was a slow and frustrating process. The medication made Tyler increasingly drowsy, and Jennifer suspected the doses were being intentionally increased to make any attempt at communication even more difficult. It was during one of these communication sessions that she finally managed to piece together the complete puzzle. Tyler, with immense effort, managed to form short sentences that revealed the whole story. 3 months before the accident, Tyler had begun to suspect strange movements in his father's company accounts. He was interning in the finance department and had access to some reports. There were large transfers to accounts he didn't recognize, contracts with shell companies, documents with signatures that appeared forged. He started investigating on his own without telling anyone. That's when he discovered that Vanessa had access to the company's financial systems through her father's passwords. She had been embezzling money for years, slowly, in amounts that never drew much individual attention, but which added up to millions. Tyler confronted Vanessa. It was a fatal mistake. She begged him not to tell her father, said she needed the money to pay gambling debts, promised to return everything. Tyler, naive, believed her, and gave her a week to explain herself to her father voluntarily. He never imagined she would try to kill him. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The accident happened when Tyler was returning from a meeting at the university. It was night, raining heavily, and he was driving on Lakeshore Drive. According to what he managed to communicate to Jennifer through exhaustive blinking, he was certain his car had been sabotaged. The brakes failed completely on a curve, causing him to crash violently against the guardrail. The car was completely destroyed, but Tyler survived. The head trauma was severe enough to cause locked-in syndrome, but not enough to kill him. Vanessa must have been desperate when she found out he was alive, but completely paralyzed. And then she did something even more diabolical. She became the dedicated caregiver, the concerned stepmother, ensuring she stayed close to him at the hospital. And slowly, through Dr. Harrison, whom she had known for a long time, she began increasing the medications that kept Tyler in a hazy state of consciousness, unable to communicate clearly with anyone. Jennifer had to leave the room that day and vomit in the bathroom. The cruelty of it all, the calculated coldness, was too much to process. But she couldn't afford to break down now. Tyler needed her. The problem was she had no proof. All she had was the word of a paralyzed patient who communicated through blinking, something any lawyer would destroy in seconds in court. She needed the evidence Tyler had mentioned, the recordings in the car's system. But how to get access to Richard Robertson's house? The answer came from an unexpected source. A week after that revelation, Jennifer was finishing her shift when she saw a man about 60 years old entering the hospital. He was tall, had graying hair, and wore an expensive but wrinkled suit. There was a deep sadness in his eyes that she immediately recognized. Richard Robertson. She had never seen Tyler's father in person. He was always traveling for work, according to the medical records. But now he was there, walking with heavy steps toward room 412. Jennifer didn't think twice. She followed him at a safe distance. Richard entered the room and stayed there for almost an hour. When he finally came out, his eyes were red, and he was wiping his face with a handkerchief. "Mr. Robertson?" Jennifer approached him in the hallway. He looked at her with the expression of someone who didn't want to talk to anyone. "Yes? My name is Jennifer Williams. I'm one of the nurses taking care of your son." "Oh." His face softened a bit. "Thank you for the work you all do. I know it's not easy. Can I speak with you in private? It's about Tyler." Something in her tone of voice made Richard stop and really look at her. They went to an empty waiting room at the end of the hallway. Jennifer took a deep breath before starting. "Mr. Robertson, what I'm about to tell you might sound completely crazy, but I need you to hear me out." And then she told him everything. About the blinking, about the communication she had established with Tyler, about the suspicions related to Vanessa, about the unexplained increases in medication. She talked about the money diversion Tyler had discovered, about her suspicions that the accident wasn't accidental. Richard remained silent throughout the entire narrative. When she finished, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. There was disbelief there, but also something more, something that seemed like a confirmation of fears he himself already had but tried to ignore. "Do you understand what you're saying?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse. "You're accusing my wife of trying to kill my son and stealing from my company. I know how it sounds, but I swear I'm not making anything up. Tyler can communicate, sir. He's conscious, he understands everything, and he's calling for help. If this is true, why hasn't anyone else noticed? Because the people who noticed were silenced or removed, and they increased his medication precisely to make communication difficult." Richard ran his hand over his face, tired. "My first wife, Hannah, He stopped, as if the words were too difficult to say. "She fell from a ladder. A domestic accident, they said. I never questioned it because I had no reason to. But after she passed away, I discovered she had a bank account I didn't know about. An account with a considerable amount of money that had been withdrawn from our savings over the years. Do you think she was planning to leave you?" "I don't know. I'll never know. But what bothers me to this day is that Vanessa was the last person to see Hannah alive that day. She was at our house because Hannah had called her for an interview. We were looking for a caregiver for Hannah's mother, who was sick. Vanessa had come to drop off a resume and was talking with Hannah when it happened." Jennifer felt a shiver run down her spine. "You never found it strange?" "At the time, no, I was in shock, grieving. And Vanessa was very helpful, assisted with everything, with the funeral, with Tyler, who was devastated. She was young, beautiful, attentive. 2 years later, when we grew closer, it seemed natural. Now I wonder if it wasn't all planned from the beginning." "Mr. Robertson, Tyler mentioned there is evidence in the crash car, something recorded in its system. Do you still have that car?" "I do. It's in my home's garage. The insurance company wanted to take it, but I asked to keep it. I don't know why. I think it was a way to not completely accept what had happened." We need to check that car. If there is proof there, we can use it to confront your wife and find out the truth." Richard fell silent for a long time, processing everything. Finally, he nodded. "Do you have transportation?" "I have a motorcycle. Tomorrow night. Vanessa will be at a charity event. She mentioned she would return late. I'll give you the address and the gate code." "But Jennifer," he looked her in the eyes intensely, "if you're wrong about all this, if this is some kind of scam or scheme, I will make sure you never work as a nurse anywhere in this country." "I understand. And if I'm right?" "If you're right, then I owe you my son's life." The next night, Jennifer was so nervous she could barely hold on to the motorcycle's handlebars. She drove to the upscale neighborhood where the Robertson mansion was located, a huge house on a quiet, tree-lined street. Richard was waiting for her at the gate, dressed casually, something she had never imagined seeing on a millionaire businessman. "Come," he said, leading her to the garage. There were at least 10 cars there, each more luxurious than the last. But at the back, covered with a tarp, was what remained of Tyler's vehicle. Richard removed the tarp, revealing a completely destroyed Lexus in the front, with crumpled bodywork and deployed airbags. Jennifer approached carefully, her heart racing. She wasn't a car expert, but Tyler had said there was something in the system. Modern cars had onboard computers that recorded data. "Mr. Robertson, do you know how to access the car's system?" "I have a trusted mechanic. He could do it, but it would take time. And I don't want Vanessa to suspect anything yet." "Can we take the car somewhere? Not without drawing too much attention." Jennifer thought for a moment, then she had an idea. "Do you have a laptop here?" Richard nodded and went to get it. When he returned, Jennifer connected a cable from the computer to a port she found under the car's destroyed dashboard. She wasn't sure if it would work, but she had seen a technician do it once when her own car had trouble. To her surprise, it worked. The laptop screen lit up showing vehicle system data. There was information about speed, brakes, acceleration, everything recorded in the minutes before the accident. "Look at this," said Jennifer, pointing to the graphs. "His speed was constant here, about 50 miles per hour. Then suddenly, he accelerated and tried to brake at the same time. See how the system registered multiple braking attempts but no response?" "That could just be a mechanical failure," said Richard, but his voice was shaky. "It could. But look here." Jennifer clicked another tab. "There's a maintenance record. The car had a service check 3 days before the accident, at a shop that—" She read the name. "That isn't the brand's authorized dealer. Why would Tyler take the car to an unknown shop?" "He wouldn't. He always used the official dealership." "Then who scheduled this maintenance?" Richard took the laptop and began checking the data. His face grew increasingly pale as he read. "There's a phone number here in the contacts. Shall call." He dialed the number on his cell phone and put it on speaker. After a few rings, someone answered. "Hello? Good evening. My name is Richard Robertson. Did you perform maintenance on a Lexus on April 23rd? "Ah, yes, sir. I remember it well. It was the lady who brought it in said it was urgent. Paid extra for us to do it the same day." "The lady?" "Yeah, your wife. She said it was a surprise for your son, that he'd been complaining about a noise in the brake." Richard hung up the phone. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the device. He leaned against the wrecked car, his face completely white. She did this. She actually did it." Jennifer didn't know what to say. She'd been right, but feeling vindicated was the last thing on her mind at that moment. She was watching a destroyed father discover his wife had tried to kill their son. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. Richard took several deep breaths, trying to compose himself. "Now we build a solid case. I'll hire private investigators to check the company finances. I'll get the complete records from that shop. I'll find out exactly what she did to the car. And when we have undeniable proof, I'll confront her." "What about Tyler? We need to get him out of that hospital. As long as she has access to him, he's in danger." "You're right." Richard ran his hand through his hair. "But I can't just transfer him without justification. Vanessa would question it, the doctors would question it. What if there was a decline in his condition, something requiring immediate transfer to another hospital?" Richard looked at her with admiration. You're very clever. But how would we trigger that without putting Tyler at real risk? I have an idea, but I'll need help from someone inside the hospital, someone we can trust. In fact, Jennifer already knew exactly who could help. There was one person at the hospital who had always been different from the others, someone who seemed to genuinely care about patients above any internal politics. Mrs. Louise had been a physical therapist at Mercy General for over 30 years. She was 62 with completely white hair pulled into a bun and a reputation for being tough but fair. Jennifer had worked with her a few times and always had the impression Mrs. Louise saw much more than she let on. The next day, Jennifer looked for her during lunch break. She found Mrs. Louise sitting alone on a bench in the hospital garden, eating a lunch she'd brought from home. "Mrs. Louise, may I sit?" "Of course, dear. Sit down." Jennifer sat and stayed silent for a moment, unsure how to begin. Mrs. Louise continued eating calmly, as if she had all the time in the world. "You want to ask me about the boy in 412, don't you?" she said suddenly. Jennifer almost choked. "How did you—" "I have eyes, child. And I've worked here long enough to recognize when someone is trying to uncover the truth about something. You're the third nurse I've seen asking the same questions, having the same suspicions." "And you? Do you suspect too?" Mrs. Louise sighed and set her lunchbox aside. "I don't suspect, I know. I was here when Mr. Richards' first wife came a few times for physical therapy. She was a kind, polite woman, and completely terrified." "Terrified of what?" "She never said directly, but I could tell. A woman who had everything, money, comfort, security, shouldn't have such frightened eyes. One day she came for her session with a bruise on her arm. She said she had bumped into something, but I know the difference between a bruise from a fall and a bruise from being grabbed." "Do you think her husband hit her?" "No, it wasn't Richard. He was always attentive to her the few times he came along. But there was someone who often accompanied her, a young woman who claimed to be the caregiver for Hannah's mother, Vanessa." Jennifer felt a shiver. "Did Vanessa know Hannah before the accident?" "Not only did she know her, but she spent a lot of time with her, and there was something about the way that girl looked at Hannah that made me uncomfortable. It was a calculating look, you know, as if she was always assessing, measuring, planning. And after Hannah passed away, Vanessa disappeared for a while. When she came back, she was engaged to Richard. Everyone thought it was strange, the speed of it, but people prefer not to ask questions when money is involved." "Mrs. Louise, why did you never say anything?" "Say to whom, girl? The police." "Based on what? A bad feeling? A weird look?" "I had no proof of anything. And when I tried to discreetly express my concerns to the business administration staff at the time, I was called a gossip and almost lost my job. But now there's Tyler, and we have proof that his accident was caused by sabotage." Mrs. Louise turned completely to her. "You have proof?" Jennifer told her everything, about the communication with Tyler, about the discovery in the car, about the money discrepancies. Mrs. Louise listened to it all in silence, her face growing more and more serious. "So what do you need from me?" "I need to transfer Tyler from the hospital without it seeming suspicious. We need a medical justification that no one can question." Mrs. Louise thought for a moment. "I can do that, but it has to be convincing. Dr. Harrison will question it. The administration will question it. His father will support the transfer, and if we have a solid justification—" "Leave it to me," Mrs. Louise interrupted. "Tomorrow morning during my session with him, I'll document some signs that indicate the need for specialized treatment that this hospital doesn't offer. Nothing that would actually harm him, but enough to justify an immediate transfer. You would do that, but you could lose your job." "Girl, I'm 62 years old, and I've seen too much in this life to stay quiet when I know a child is suffering. If they fire me, so be it. But I won't leave that boy in that woman's hands for one more day." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The plan was set in motion the next morning. Mrs. Louise arrived early for the physical therapy session with Tyler. Jennifer was on duty and watched from a distance, her heart racing. She saw Mrs. Louise perform the routine tests, document every reaction, every minimal movement. And then, after almost an hour, Mrs. Louise came out of the room with a worried expression. "I need to speak with the doctor." "Howard, immediately," she said to Sharon, who was at the nursing station. "He's in surgery." "Then connect me with him as soon as he's out. It's about the patient in 412. I'm seeing signs of progressive respiratory compromise that could worsen rapidly. He needs more specialized care than we can provide here." Sharon looked at her with suspicion. Respiratory compromise? There was nothing about that in yesterday's report. "That's why it's called progressive, Sharon. The signs started appearing today, and if we don't act fast, we could have an emergency on our hands." Dr. Harrison arrived an hour later, visibly annoyed at being called. He entered Tyler's room with Mrs. Louise and stayed there for over half an hour. When he came out, he was pale. "Prepare everything for a transfer," he told Sharon. "We need to take him to a specialized neurological injury center. Today." "But don't you think we should wait, run more tests first?" "There's no time, Mrs. Louise is right. The signs are there. If we wait, it might be too late." Sharon seemed to want to argue further, but Dr. Harrison was already walking away, talking on the phone with someone. Jennifer saw when he called Vanessa to inform her of the transfer. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw his expression change as he spoke. Vanessa clearly wasn't happy with the news. 20 minutes later, Vanessa arrived at the hospital like a hurricane. She went straight to Tyler's room, then came back and confronted Dr. Harrison in the hallway. "You can't transfer him without my authorization." "Actually, I can and will. It's a medical decision based on the patient's needs. And his father, who is the primary legal guardian, has already authorized it." "Richard authorized it? When did you speak with him?" "He was here earlier today. He spent the morning with me reviewing the case." Vanessa visibly tensed up. Jennifer watched everything from afar, pretending to be busy with papers, but attentive to every word, every expression. "Which hospital is he going to?" "Advanced Neurological Institute on the south side. It's one of the best specialized centers in the country." "But it's too far. How will I visit him every day?" "Vanessa, we're talking about your stepson's health, not your convenience." Dr. Harrison's voice had a sharp tone that Jennifer had never heard before. Something had changed. The doctor, who previously seemed to be on Vanessa's side, was now visibly distant and cold with her. Jennifer wondered what Richard had said to him that morning. The transfer happened in the late afternoon. A private ambulance arrived, and a specialized team began preparing Tyler for transport. Jennifer watched Vanessa throughout the process. The woman was clearly agitated, pacing back and forth, talking on the phone in a low voice, her hands visibly shaking. When they finally came to get Tyler, Jennifer approached the stretcher. She got a moment alone with him before he left. "You're going to be okay now," she whispered. "Your father knows everything, and I'll make sure the truth comes out." Tyler's eyes filled with tears and he blinked once, slowly. "Thank you." The ambulance left with Tyler, accompanied by Richard and a medical team. Vanessa tried to go along, but Richard stopped her. "I need you to stay here and handle the paperwork with the hospital," he said, his voice neutral but firm. "There's still a lot to do." Vanessa stood still in the hospital parking lot, watching the ambulance drive away. And Jennifer, watching from a third-floor window, saw the exact moment when the mask of worry fell from Vanessa's face, revealing something much darker underneath. The next few days were strange at the hospital. Vanessa stopped showing up, which was a relief for Jennifer. Room 412 remained empty and was assigned to another patient. Life at the hospital continued as if Tyler had never been there. But Jennifer knew things were far from over. Richard kept her informed through discreet messages. Tyler was responding well at the new hospital, where his medication had been drastically reduced under the supervision of neurologists who genuinely cared about his recovery and had no conflicts of interest. The investigators Richard had hired were uncovering more and more evidence of the systematic embezzlement Vanessa had orchestrated over the years. It wasn't just a few million, it was tens of millions, in an elaborate scheme involving shell companies, fake contracts, and fraudulent documentation. Even more disturbing, they had found connections between Vanessa and the auto shop that had sabotaged Tyler's car. The shop owner, when confronted with the evidence, ended up confessing that she had paid a substantial amount for him to alter the brake system in a way that would look like a natural mechanical failure. But the most shocking discovery came when the investigators began looking into Vanessa's history before she met the Robertson family. Her real name wasn't Vanessa Parker. It was Vanessa Miller, and she had a history of working as a caregiver for wealthy elderly people, always coincidentally present when these seniors suffered fatal accidents or changed their wills in her favor. No case had resulted in formal charges. She was careful, patient, always leaving room for reasonable doubt. But the pattern was there, clear as day, for those who knew where to look. Hannah Robertson had just been another victim on a long list. One afternoon, 3 weeks after Tyler's transfer, Richard showed up at the hospital. He asked to speak with Jennifer privately. They met in the same garden where she had spoken with Mrs. Louise. "Tyler is improving," he said, and there were tears in his eyes. "He managed to move his fingers yesterday. The doctors are optimistic that with proper treatment, he may regain some mobility over time." "That's wonderful." "And he said your name." It was the first word he managed to pronounce since the accident. "Jennifer. He wanted me to come here personally to thank you." Jennifer felt her own eyes fill with tears. "I only did what was right." "You did much more than that. You saved my son, and by doing so, you saved me too. If he were no longer here, I would have spent the rest of my life living with that woman, not knowing the truth about her, about Hannah, about everything. What will happen now? With Vanessa?" Richard took a deep breath. "Tonight, I'm going to confront her. I have all the evidence organized, I have lawyers waiting. She will have two choices: confess everything voluntarily and return the money, or I hand everything over to the authorities and she faces a criminal trial." "Do you think she will confess?" "I don't know, but either way she will never get near my son again, and she will pay for everything she has done." He fell silent for a moment, looking at the sky that was beginning to darken. "You know, I feel like a fool for being so blind, for letting her into my life, into Tyler's life, for not protecting Hannah when she probably needed protection. You couldn't have known. She is a professional manipulator. She has fooled many people before. Still, a father should protect his children, a husband should protect his wife, and I failed in both. But you won't fail anymore, Mr. Richard, and Tyler knows that. He told me through the blinks that he never doubted your love. He just needed you to know the truth." Richard nodded, too emotional to speak. He stayed a few more minutes, then said goodbye and left. Jennifer saw him leave, that man who had so much money and power, but had been so vulnerable, so human in his suffering and his search for redemption. That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about everything that had happened in the last few weeks, about how her life had changed since she accepted that job at Mercy General Hospital. She had gone to work there, expecting only to gain experience and build her career. She never imagined she would end up involved in something so complex, so dangerous, but she didn't regret it either. When she thought of Tyler's eyes blinking desperately, asking for help, she knew she had done the only thing she could do. She had listened. She had believed. She had fought. At 3 a.m, her phone rang. It was Richard. "She ran away," he said, his voice tense. "What?" "I came home to confront her, but she was already gone. She took her things, cleaned out the joint bank account we had, and disappeared. The security guards told me she left the house in the afternoon and never came back. She must have found out you were investigating." "Probably. I should have been more discreet, but I was so focused on gathering evidence that I didn't think she could run away before even being confronted." "Did you tell the police?" "It's all taken care of. But she has a lot of money, connections, probably fake documents. It might take time to find her." Jennifer felt a mix of relief and frustration. On one hand, Vanessa was no longer around to threaten Tyler. On the other, she was free, without having paid for anything she had done. "And does Tyler know?" "Not yet. I'll tell him tomorrow. He'll be frustrated too, I know. But at least he's safe now." In the following days, the story started to leak to the media. Not all the details, but enough for newspapers and news sites to start publishing stories about Vanessa Parker, the con artist who had deceived one of the wealthiest families in Chicago. There was speculation about her whereabouts, theories about where she might be hiding. Mercy General Hospital went into damage control mode. Dr. Harrison was suspended while an internal investigation looked into how involved he was in Vanessa's scheme. Sharon, the head nurse, was transferred to another department, and Jennifer, to her surprise, was called to the board. She entered the room expecting to be fired. Instead, the director greeted her with a handshake and a genuine smile. "Ms. Williams, I would like to congratulate you on your courage and dedication. What you did was exemplary, even if it was done in an unconventional way. Thank you, sir. We are implementing new protocols for communication with patients with limited mobility, inspired by your work with Mr. Robertson, and we would like to offer you a permanent position here, with a significant salary increase to lead this new initiative." Jennifer didn't expect that. She was sure she would be punished in some way for acting against orders, for questioning the established procedures. I accept, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. We're the ones who thank you. You reminded us of the reason we chose this profession. It's not about protocols or policies. It's about caring for people. 2 weeks later, Jennifer went to visit Tyler at the Advanced Neurological Institute. It was the first time she had seen him since the transfer. When she entered the room, he was sitting in a wheelchair, still with very limited mobility, but visibly better than he was at Mercy General. "Hi, Tyler," she said, approaching with a smile. He looked at her and his eyes lit up. He tried to speak, the effort visible in every muscle of his face. Jennifer, he managed to pronounce, his voice weak but clear. She had to hold back tears. "Wow, you're talking." "A little," he smiled, a crooked but genuine smile. Thank you. You don't have to thank me." Yes, I do." He made a huge effort to continue. "You saved my life." Jennifer sat beside him and took his hand. He still couldn't move his fingers much, but she felt a light pressure, a minimal squeeze that meant everything. "The doctors say you're making incredible progress, far beyond what they expected. I have a reason." "Now," said Tyler, each word a battle. "No, the truth will come out. It will. It might take time, but it will. Vanessa? They haven't found her yet, but they will, and when they do, she'll answer for everything." Tyler nodded slowly. There was something in his eyes, a maturity that wasn't there before. The ordeal had changed him, obviously, not just physically, but on a deeper level. He had seen the worst of human nature, had been betrayed by someone who was supposed to care for him, had spent months trapped in his own body, unable to defend himself, but he had survived, and he was coming back, step by step. "My dad," Tyler said after a silence. "How is he?" "Better. I think you two are recovering together, each in your own way." "He blames himself. I know, we talked about it, but it wasn't his fault, Tyler. Your stepmother was an expert manipulator. She fooled a lot of people." "Mom," Tyler said suddenly, his voice breaking. "My mom, too. I'm not sure, but the evidence suggests yes." A tear ran down Tyler's face. Jennifer took a tissue and gently wiped it away. "One day," he said, his voice firmer now. "One day, I'll be okay, and I'll testify against her. You will, and I'll be there to support you." They kept talking for another hour, with Tyler making a huge effort to pronounce each word, but determined to express himself. Jennifer told him about the changes at the hospital, about Mrs. Louise who had sent her love, about how everyone was rooting for him. When she was about to leave, Richard entered the room. He looked better too, less tired, less tormented than he had been in recent weeks. "Jennifer, good to see you here," he greeted. "Tyler, have you told her the news?" Tyler shook his head, a small but deliberate movement. "What news?" asked Jennifer. "Vanessa was found," said Richard, and there was a dark satisfaction in his voice. "Trying to board a flight to Panama with fake documents. She was detained at the airport." Jennifer felt a weight lift from her shoulders. That's great. There will be a long legal process ahead, but we have all the evidence we need, and Tyler, when he's ready, will be able to give his testimony. I will be ready, said Tyler, looking at his father with determination. Richard approached his son and put a hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture, but full of emotion. I know you will, son. I know. In the months that followed, Tyler's recovery continued remarkably. He began to regain movement in his hands, then in his arms. His speech became clearer, more fluid. It was a slow and exhausting process, full of frustrations and setbacks, but he persisted day after day. Jennifer visited when she could, becoming not just the nurse who had saved him, but a genuine friend. They talked about everything, from his life before the accident to plans for the future. Tyler spoke about wanting to go back to school, about wanting to do something meaningful with his life, something that would honor the memory of his mother, Hannah. The case against Vanessa dragged on in the legal system. She had hired the best lawyers that stolen money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. The embezzlement, the car sabotage, the connections with other possible victims in the past. Everything was documented, proven, undeniable. But there was a problem. For Vanessa to be convicted of attempted murder, they needed Tyler's testimony, explaining how he had discovered the embezzlement, how he had confronted her, and how he was certain the accident hadn't been accidental. And to do that, Tyler needed to be well enough to withstand intense questioning from prosecutors and defense attorneys. It was almost a year after the accident when Tyler finally felt ready. He could already move his arms with relative ease, had regained some movement in his legs, and his speech was almost completely normalized, although he still needed to take occasional pauses to find the right words. The day of the testimony was tense. Jennifer went to the courthouse to support Tyler, along with Richard, Mrs. Louise, and several other people who had cared about him during his recovery journey. Tyler himself arrived in his wheelchair, wearing an elegant suit, his face serious but determined. Vanessa was there too, seated beside her lawyers, wearing a discreet outfit and with a carefully neutral expression. But when her eyes met Tyler's, Jennifer saw a flash of something that could be fear or perhaps calculation, trying to figure out how much he really knew, how much he could prove. Tyler was called to testify. Richard helped him position himself in front of the microphone, adjusting the wheelchair so he would be comfortable. The judge, a woman in her 60s with kind but firm eyes, asked if he needed any special accommodations. "No, Your Honor," Tyler replied, his voice clear and firm. "I'm ready." And then he told everything. He spoke about how he had discovered irregularities in the company accounts, about how he had spent weeks quietly investigating, gathering evidence. He spoke about the confrontation with Vanessa, about how she had cried and begged, promised to return everything, swearing she would never do anything like it again. He spoke about the week that followed, where he had started to notice strange things. His car being borrowed by Vanessa, claiming hers was in maintenance, her asking questions about his routine, about what times he drove to the university, small things that at the time hadn't seemed suspicious, but in retrospect formed a clear pattern. And then he spoke about the night of the accident, how he was driving along Lakeshore Drive when suddenly the car accelerated on its own, how he had stepped on the brake repeatedly but nothing happened, the feeling of growing panic as the car gained speed, heading toward the curve, the collision, the pain, the darkness, and then the prison, waking up in a body that wouldn't respond, being conscious, understanding everything, but not being able to communicate, seeing Vanessa visiting daily, whispering threats when she was alone with him, making sure he remained too medicated to communicate clearly. The silence in the courtroom when Tyler finished speaking was absolute. Even Vanessa's lawyers seemed shaken. The judge cleared her throat, visibly moved. "Mr. Robertson, are you absolutely certain the accident wasn't an accident?" "I am, Your Honor. My car had just been serviced at the official dealership 2 days before. The brakes were perfect, and there are records proving my car was taken to an unauthorized shop by my stepmother where the brakes were tampered with. The technicians from that shop have already confessed to what they did." The defense attorney tried to question the credibility of the testimony. arguing that Tyler's memory might have been affected by the brain trauma, that he could be confusing dreams with reality, that the medications might have caused false memories. But Richard had prepared everything meticulously. There were specialists ready to testify about Tyler's condition, confirming that his memory and cognitive abilities were intact. There were medical records showing he had always been conscious, even when paralyzed. There was physical evidence of the sabotaged car. And most importantly, there was Jennifer. When she was called to testify, she told how she had established communication with Tyler at the hospital, about the blinks that clearly indicated he was conscious and trying to communicate. She brought her notes, showing the conversations she had with him through that rudimentary but effective system. "Tyler told me about the sabotage," said Jennifer, looking directly at Vanessa. "He told me about the embezzlement, about the confrontation, about everything. And everything he told me was later confirmed by physical evidence." The trial lasted 3 days. Witness after witness came to testify. The mechanic who had sabotaged the car, who admitted to being paid by Vanessa, employees at Richard's company who had noticed the irregularities but didn't feel safe to report them, private investigators who had tracked Vanessa's history, finding suspicious patterns in other cases involving people she had cared for in the past. Mrs. Louise testified about Hannah, about her fears, about the suspicions she had always had but could never prove. Each piece of the puzzle fell into place, forming an irrefutable picture of manipulation, greed, and attempted murder. On the 3rd day, the jury withdrew to deliberate. It was 4 hours of anxious waiting. Jennifer sat next to Tyler and Richard, none of them speaking much, each lost in their own thoughts. When the jury finally returned, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. The jury foreman stood up, a middle-aged man with a grim expression. "In the case of the state versus Vanessa Parker, charged with attempted homicide, fraud, sabotage, and other related crimes, we, the jury, find her guilty on all counts." Richard let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Tyler closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. Jennifer felt her own tears falling, tears of relief, of justice finally served. Vanessa showed no emotion. She simply stood still, looking straight ahead, as if this wasn't really happening to her. The sentencing came 2 weeks later, 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole before serving at least 15 years, and the obligation to return all the stolen money, with interest and monetary correction. To many it might have seemed too little. After all, she had tried to kill someone, had destroyed a family, had caused immeasurable suffering. But for Tyler and Richard it was closure. It was confirmation that the truth had prevailed, that the system, although imperfect and slow, could still work. Life began to return to normal after that, or at least to a new version of normal. Tyler continued his physical therapy and rehabilitation with renewed determination. 2 years after the accident, he managed to take his first steps without support, a moment that brought tears of joy to everyone who had followed his journey. He returned to studying, adapting his schedule to his physical condition. He decided to switch from business administration to psychology, wanting to better understand human behavior, eventually wanting to work with victims of trauma and abuse. Richard stepped back partially from business, delegating more responsibilities to spend more time with his son. He created a foundation in Hannah's name, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic and financial abuse, using part of the fortune recovered from Vanessa to fund the project. Mrs. Louise retired from Mercy General Hospital, but continued working as a consultant, training new physical therapists about the importance of truly listening to and observing their patients, of never assuming that someone in a bed is just a body without a will of their own. And Jennifer became the director of the hospital's new department for communication with patients with limited mobility. She developed protocols that were later adopted by hospitals across the country. She trained hundreds of nurses on how to establish communication with patients who cannot speak. But more important than professional recognition, she had made friends. Tyler and Richard became part of her life in a way that went far beyond their professional relationship. They had dinner together regularly, celebrated birthdays together, supported each other through the difficult times that inevitably came their way. 3 years after the accident, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Jennifer was invited to the Robertsons' house. When she arrived, she found the garden decorated with flowers. There were several people she recognized, and many she didn't know. "What is all this?" she asked, confused. Tyler appeared, walking with just a slight cane for support, a huge smile on his face. "It's a party. For you. For me. But it's not my birthday." "It's not a birthday," said Richard, approaching. "It's a life anniversary. 3 years ago you saved my son. And by saving him you saved our family, you saved my company, you saved much more than you can imagine. So we wanted to do something to truly thank you." Jennifer was speechless when she realized that the whole party was in her honor. There were doctors and nurses from the hospital, there were patients and families she had helped, there were people who had simply heard her story and wanted to thank her for showing that there are still people who do what's right, regardless of the personal cost. In the late afternoon, after most of the guests had left, Jennifer sat in the garden with Tyler and Richard. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. "You know," said Tyler, looking at the horizon, "sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't noticed my blinks that first day. If you had been just another nurse doing your job mechanically, without really looking, without really seeing. I would have spent the rest of my life in that bed," he continued, his voice growing more serious. "Conscious but trapped, knowing the truth but unable to tell it, seeing Vanessa steal everything from my family, knowing she had tried to kill me but unable to do anything." "Don't think about that," said Jennifer softly. "That's not what happened. But it could have been, and it would have been if not for you. You didn't just save me, Jennifer. You gave me back my life. You gave me back my future." "We both owe you more than we can express," added Richard. "That's why there's something we want to offer you." He took an envelope and handed it to Jennifer. She opened it and found documents inside. "It's a full scholarship," explained Richard, "for you to get your master's, doctorate, whatever you want in the field of nursing or healthcare. Here in the state or abroad, all expenses paid, with a stipend included so you don't have to worry about money while you study." I can't accept this," Jennifer stammered in shock. "You can, and you will," said Tyler firmly. "You have a gift, Jennifer, a gift for seeing people, for understanding them, for fighting for them. And that gift deserves to be developed to the fullest. Think of how many other people you could help if you had even more knowledge, even more tools." "But I already have a good job. It's not about the job," interrupted Richard. "It's about what you can become. You saved my son because you looked beyond the protocol, beyond what's expected. Imagine what you can do with more education, more resources." Jennifer looked at the two men who had become so important in her life. She thought about everything she had been through, all the risks she had taken, all the sleepless nights wondering if she was doing the right thing. And she realized she had. Not just the right thing, but something that had changed not only their lives but her own as well. She had discovered a strength within herself that she didn't know existed. She had learned that sometimes doing the right thing means going against the system, against people in positions of power, against your own safety. "Okay," she finally said, smiling through tears. "I accept, and I'll make every penny, every opportunity count. I'll become the best professional I can be." "We know you will," said Tyler, taking her hand. "Because that's what you do. You don't give up. You fight. You see what others overlook, and you act." They sat there as the sun finished setting. 3 people whose lives had become intertwined in a way none of them could have predicted. A nurse who refused to ignore a silent cry for help. A son who survived the unthinkable through sheer willpower. And a father who learned, in the most painful way possible, the importance of truly paying attention to the people he loved. 5 years later, Jennifer defended her doctoral thesis on advanced communication methods with neurological patients. Her research was published in international medical journals and began being implemented in hospitals around the world. She developed a protocol that had helped hundreds of patients regain some form of communication, giving voice to people who had been silenced by accidents, illnesses, or neurological conditions. Tyler, by this time, had not only fully recovered from paralysis, but had graduated with a degree in psychology and started a master's in neuroscience. He worked at a clinic specializing in trauma victim rehabilitation, using his own experience to help others navigate the physical and emotional challenges of recovery. Richard had become an activist, using his influence and resources to push for changes in the healthcare system, fighting for greater transparency in private hospitals, for better protection protocols for vulnerable patients, for harsher penalties for healthcare professionals who abuse their positions of power. The Vanessa Parker case became a case study in law and medical schools, an example of how greed and manipulation can occur in the most unlikely places, and how the vigilance and courage of a single person can make all the difference. Vanessa was serving her sentence in a medium-security prison. She tried to appeal multiple times, always unsuccessfully. The evidence against her was simply too overwhelming. She never admitted guilt, never showed remorse, but it no longer mattered. The truth had come to light, and justice, though slow, had prevailed. A decade after that first day in room 412, Jennifer was giving a lecture at an international medical conference when someone raised their hand to ask a question. "Dr. Williams, when you first realized Mr. Robertson was trying to communicate, were you afraid? Afraid of being wrong, of ruining your career, of facing the consequences?" Jennifer thought for a moment before answering. "Of course I was afraid. I was young, inexperienced, in my first real job at a prestigious hospital. I had everything to lose if I was wrong, but the truth is I would have lost much more if I had stayed silent. I would have lost my self-respect. I had lost confidence that I was doing what I chose to do, which was to care for people. Being a healthcare professional isn't just about following protocols," she continued. "It's about seeing the person in the bed as exactly that, a person, with fears, hopes, stories. It's about understanding that our job isn't just keeping bodies functioning, but protecting lives, dignities, futures." Tyler was screaming for help in the only way he could. And if I hadn't listened, if none of us had listened, he'd be dead now. Or worse, he'd be alive but trapped in a body that doesn't respond, conscious but voiceless, a life sentence from which he could never escape. So yes, I was afraid. But acting despite fear is what defines courage. And all of us, as healthcare professionals, need to find that courage every day. Because our decisions, our attention, or lack thereof, can literally determine whether someone lives or remains in a state of living death. The audience applauded, and in the middle of the audience, sitting side by side, were Tyler and Richard, applauding along with everyone else, pride evident on their faces. After the lecture, they went to dinner together at a quiet restaurant. It was something they did regularly, a tradition that had started in those difficult days after the accident and that continued even now when everyone had moved on with their lives. "Did you know that Vanessa asked to see you?" Richard asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Jennifer looked at him, surprised. "She asked to see me. When?" "Last week. She sent a letter through her lawyer, said she wanted to apologize, make peace." "And what did you say?" "Nothing. I tore up the letter. She doesn't deserve our time, our attention, our forgiveness." There was bitterness in Richard's voice, a wound that even after all these years hadn't completely healed. "Dad," Tyler said gently, "by holding on to this anger, you're only hurting yourself." "Easy for you to say," Richard retorted. "She tried to kill you, Tyler. She killed your mother. How can I just forgive that?" "I'm not saying to forgive," Tyler replied. "I'm saying to let go. They're different things. Forgiving would mean saying what she did was somehow acceptable. Letting go is simply stopping carrying the weight of hatred every day." Richard fell silent, processing his son's words. It was incredible, Jennifer thought, how Tyler had matured. The naive young man who had trusted Vanessa no longer existed. In his place was a man who had looked evil in the eye, who had survived the worst humanity could offer, and who had chosen not to let it destroy him. "Maybe one day," Richard said finally, "but not today. Today I still feel too much anger." "And that's okay," Jennifer said. "Everyone has their own pace for processing trauma. There's no right timeline for healing." "Speaking of healing," Tyler said, changing the subject, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. "Jennifer, Have you seen the results of the pilot study using your protocol at the hospital in Boston? I have. 42% of patients managed to establish some form of communication. It's a huge increase compared to traditional methods. And to think it all started with some blinks in a hospital room. Tyler smiled. You turned my desperation into something that's helping people across the country. We turned, Jennifer corrected. You were brave enough not to give up, to keep trying to communicate even when it seemed impossible, and your father was brave enough to believe in an unknown nurse who was saying things that sounded crazy. Team improbable, Tyler joked, raising his glass of juice, to our strange and wonderful family. They raised their glasses. 3 people whom fate, or perhaps just coincidence, had brought together in an extraordinary way. They weren't related by blood, but the bonds they shared were as strong as any family tie. The years kept passing. Jennifer became a university professor, inspiring a new generation of nurses to always see the person behind the patient. Tyler opened his own rehabilitation clinic, offering free treatment for low-income individuals. Richard established 2 more foundations, one focused on preventing elder abuse and another on locked-in syndrome research. Mrs. Louise unfortunately passed away at 78, but not before seeing the impact her courage that day had caused. At her funeral, Tyler gave a moving speech about how she had been one of the people who saved him, and how her willingness to do the right thing, even at the risk of losing her job, had been an example of true integrity. Mercy General Hospital, after the scandal, implemented drastic changes in its protocols and institutional culture. The new medical director created an anonymous channel for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. He also established an independent ethics committee to review complex cases. Sharon, the head nurse who had warned Jennifer not to get involved, eventually sought her out to apologize. They had a long and painful conversation about how the healthcare system sometimes forces professionals to choose between their conscience and their career. Sharon admitted she always knew something was wrong with Tyler's case, but was too afraid to question it. I envy your courage, Sharon said that day, and I'm ashamed of my cowardice. It wasn't cowardice, Jennifer replied gently. It was fear. Legitimate fear of losing your job, of not being able to support your family. The system was broken, and you were doing the best you could within it. Still, I should have done more. Like Bethany tried to do, like you did. But now you can do more, said Jennifer. You can use this experience to ensure this never happens again on your shift with your patients. Each of us has the power to create change, even if small. End of story. So, what did you think of this story? Do you think you would have had Jennifer's courage? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to leave your like. If you enjoyed this moving story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other amazing stories that will make you reflect on courage, justice, and the importance of always doing what's right.